Our sister was switched, the orphan girls told the millionaire, but moments later, when they discover the truth, they immediately start to cry. Comment with your thoughts on this story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and let me know which city you're watching from. I'm eager to know if you enjoyed my story and to get to know you better, so please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The desperate cry echoed through the aesthetic corridors of University General Hospital in Denver, cutting through the silence of the early morning like a sharp blade. Arthur Miller, 42, nearly dropped the coffee he was holding in his trembling hands when two small, ragged figures burst through the maternity ward door, carrying something that made his world collapse in a matter of seconds. The first was Isabella, 8 years old, with disheveled hair and dirty clothes that spoke of days on the streets. Her large eyes shone with a frightening determination for someone so young. Beside her, Victoria, only 4, trembled as she held a bundle of cloths against her chest that moved gently. Sir, please listen to us," Isabella shouted, running directly to Arthur, who was still wearing the wrinkled suit from the day before. "They switched your baby. They switched her, and we saw everything." Arthur felt the floor give way beneath his feet. He had spent the last 18 hours anxiously awaiting the birth of his first child, pacing the corridors, while Catherine, his 35-year-old wife, endured a difficult labor. He had just met his daughter, a healthy girl according to the doctors, and now these children show up talking about a switch? "What are you talking about?" he asked, crouching down to their level. "What switch?" "We work in the laundry, sir," Isabella explained quickly, looking nervously from side to side. "Our mom taught us how to fold the baby clothes. And this morning we saw when the head nurse took your baby and swapped her for another." Victoria, who had been silent until then, held out the bundle to Arthur. When he gently pulled back the cloths, his heart stopped. The baby sleeping there had a small crescent moon-shaped birthmark on her forehead, identical to the one he himself had carried since childhood, a feature his grandmother always said was the mark of the Millers. "This is impossible," he murmured, but his voice lacked conviction. At that moment, firm footsteps echoed down the hall. Beatrice, the head nurse, approached with a face red with anger, her 50 years marked by expression lines that now deepened with irritation. "What are these brats doing here?" she snarled, trying to push the girls away from Arthur. "Mr. Miller, these children are known for causing trouble. They're always making up stories to get money." "It's not a lie," Isabella protested, shielding Victoria with her body. "You know it's true. Our mother, Diana, told us everything before she disappeared." The name made Beatrice instantly pale, but she quickly composed herself. "I don't know what Diana you're talking about, and I demand you leave here immediately, before I call security." Arthur watched the exchange, noticing Beatrice's nervousness. Something wasn't right. "Wait a moment," he said, raising his hand. "Let them speak." "Mr. Miller, you've just been through a very intense experience," Beatrice said, forcing a professional smile. "These children take advantage of parents' vulnerability. Your daughter is perfectly fine in the nursery." But Arthur couldn't take his eyes off the birthmark on the baby Victoria was holding. It was exactly like his, in the same place, with the same shape. The chances of this being a coincidence were minimal. "Where did you get this baby?" he asked the girls. "We saw when the head nurse switched the babies in the nursery," Isabella repeated. "She took yours and put this one in its place. Then she took yours somewhere else." Beatrice laughed with disdain. "What a fertile imagination. Mr. Miller, I assure you there was no switch. Our hospital has strict protocols. Then you wouldn't mind if I requested a DNA test," Arthur suggested. Testing the nurse's reaction. The silence that followed was telling. Beatrice opened and closed her mouth several times before she could speak. That is completely unnecessary and offensive. Are you questioning our professional competence?" Isabella seized on the nurse's hesitation. "Sir, our mom used to work here. She cleaned the rooms and always said there were wrong things happening." Until one day she disappeared. "Diana Santos," Victoria whispered for the first time, her voice small but clear. "My mom." Beatrice became visibly agitated. "Enough of this charade. Security!" Two uniformed men appeared quickly, but Arthur placed himself between them and the girls. "Wait, I want to hear what they have to say." "Mr. Miller," Beatrice said, trying to regain her composure, "you're tired, stressed. Don't let these children manipulate your emotions. Your wife just gave birth. Think of her, Catherine." Arthur felt a knot in his stomach as he remembered the strange expression on his wife's face when she met their daughter. She had looked at the baby with a coldness that disturbed him, but he had attributed it to the exhaustion of childbirth. "Mrs. Catherine didn't seem to like the baby they gave her very much," Isabella observed, with the frightening perceptiveness of someone who grew up on the streets. "We saw her turn her face away through the room window." Arthur felt the world spin. It was true. Catherine had rejected the child almost immediately, claiming to be too tired, but her eyes reflected something that seemed closer to aversion than exhaustion. "That's enough," Beatrice declared, signaling to the security guards. "Get these children out of here now." "No," Arthur said firmly, surprising everyone. "I want the DNA test. On both babies." The look of panic that flashed across Beatrice's face was quick, but Arthur caught it. There was something deeply wrong happening here, and these two ragged girls might have been the only ones brave enough to expose the truth. "Sir," Isabella said, taking Arthur's hand with her small, dirty fingers, "we don't have a place to live. But Mom always said that one day she would find a good family for us. Maybe that's you." Victoria, still holding the baby, looked at Arthur with large, hopeful eyes. "He's your real son. We know it." Beatrice took a few steps back, her face now as pale as paper. I need to check some protocols," she stammered before hurrying away down the corridor. Arthur stood there, in the middle of the maternity ward hallway, holding two mysteries: a baby carrying his birthmark in the arms of a 4-year-old orphan, and the growing certainty that his life had changed forever. What he would discover in the coming hours would change not only his destiny, but also that of these two girls who'd appeared like angels of truth in his most vulnerable hour. The questions multiplied in his mind as he watched Beatrice hastily disappear at the end of the hall, leaving behind a trail of lies he was determined to unravel. The 3 days that followed were the most torturous of Arthur's life. After the encounter at the hospital, he had managed to convince the authorities to allow the girls to stay temporarily in a shelter while awaiting the results of the DNA tests. But what tormented him most was Catherine's increasingly strange behavior. His wife had returned home with the baby the doctors assured them was their daughter, but the rejection was palpable. Catherine could barely look at the child, who cried incessantly, as if sensing the lack of a maternal connection. When Arthur suggested she try breastfeeding, Catherine would make excuses or simply leave the room. "She's not normal, Arthur," Catherine said on the morning of the 3rd day, observing the baby in the crib with an expression bordering on disgust. "Look at how she looks at me. It's as if she knows that we're not." "Not what?" Arthur asked, holding the daughter who had finally stopped crying in his arms. "Catherine, you're going through postpartum depression. It's normal to feel disconnected at first." But Catherine shook her head vigorously. "It's not that. It's different. This child doesn't recognize me because I'm not her mother." His wife's words echoed in Arthur's mind all day. When he arrived at the office of Miller and Associates Construction, he couldn't concentrate on anything. Clayton, his partner and best friend since their teenage years, noticed his state. "Man, you look terrible," Clayton said, entering the room without ceremony. "What's going on? I thought you'd be over the moon with your daughter's arrival." Arthur looked at his 40-year-old friend, with whom he shared not only his business, but also his most intimate confidences. Clayton had always been like a brother to him, especially after the premature death of Arthur's parents in a car accident 5 years earlier. "Clayton, I need to tell you something strange that happened at the hospital. As he recounted the meeting with the girls, Arthur carefully watched his friend's reactions. When he mentioned the name Diana, he noticed a slight tremor in Clayton's hands, but the man quickly disguised it by taking a sip of coffee. Two crazy street kids trying to pull a scam, Clayton said dismissively. Arthur, you're vulnerable right now. These kids take advantage of that. And the birthmark, Arthur insisted. It was identical to mine. Coincidence. You're seeing things that aren't there. But something in Clayton's voice didn't sound natural. Arthur decided to investigate on his own. That afternoon, he drove to the city's market district where the girls had said they lived. What he found there shook him to his core. Under the Colfax Avenue Bridge, in a makeshift camp of cardboard and tarps, Isabella cared for Victoria like a devoted mother would her daughter. The two shared a tiny space with other homeless people, but they kept their corner organized and relatively clean. Mr. Arthur, Isabella exclaimed upon seeing him approach, you came to visit us. Victoria ran to him with a smile that lit up her dirty face. Mister, did you bring the baby? Arthur's heart broke, seeing the conditions in which the girls lived. How do you survive here? We do odd jobs, Isabella explained with a pragmatism frightening for her age. I wash cars at the farmer's market. Victoria helps the ladies carry their bags. We get by. And your mother? Tell me about Diana. Isabella's face saddened. Mum worked as a cleaner in several places, at the hospital, at some rich people's houses, at the city hall. She always said that one day she would get a good house for us. At rich people's houses, Arthur repeated, a chill running down his spine. Yes, a big house in Cherry Creek. The lady of the house was a bit fussy, always complaining about everything. Mum said her husband was a nice guy, but that the woman was jealous of even her own shadow. Arthur knew Cherry Creek well. It was where Clayton lived with his wife, Patricia. Could it be? Do you remember your mother's boss's name? Victoria, who was playing with a rag doll, looked up. Aunt Patricia. She didn't like it when I went with Mommy. Arthur's world trembled. Patricia was Clayton's wife. Diana had worked at his best friend's house. The connections began to form in his mind, creating a disturbing pattern. And do you know why your mother stopped working there? Isabella exchanged a significant look with Victoria before answering. Mom got pregnant with Victoria. Aunt Patricia got very angry and said she didn't want a pregnant woman working in her house. Who is Victoria's father? The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. Isabella bit her lip, clearly struggling with some painful secret. Mom never wanted to say. She just said he was an important man who had a family and could never acknowledge us. Arthur felt nausea rising in his stomach. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together in a terrifying way. Clayton, Diana, Patricia, the woman's sudden disappearance. That night, he decided to confront his friend directly. He arrived at Clayton's house in Cherry Creek at 9 o'clock, finding him alone in his office. Clayton, I need to ask you a direct question, Arthur said, closing the door behind him. Did you know a woman named Diana Santos? The reaction was instantaneous. Clayton turned pale and dropped the glass of whiskey he was holding. Why are you asking that? Answer the question. Arthur, you're obsessed with this crazy story from those brats. It's not going to lead anywhere. Diana worked at your house. The girls confirmed it. Clayton stood up abruptly, walking to the window. So what? Lots of people have worked here. It doesn't mean anything. Victoria is your daughter. The words came out as a direct accusation. Clayton spun around quickly, his eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and panic. That's ridiculous. You've completely lost your mind. Then explain why Diana disappeared right after Patricia fired her for being pregnant. Explain why you got nervous when I mentioned her name this morning. Clayton moved dangerously close to Arthur. You're playing with fire, my friend. Some truths are better left buried. What truths? If you keep digging where you shouldn't, you might end up discovering things that will destroy more than you can imagine, Clayton said, his voice laced with a veiled threat. Think carefully before you continue with this obsession. You have a company to run, a wife to take care of. Arthur felt the ground collapse beneath him. Not only had Clayton indirectly confirmed his suspicion, but he was also threatening him. The man he considered a brother, with whom he had built a business empire, had destroyed a woman's life and abandoned 2 children to their fate. Where is Diana, Clayton? How the hell should I know? She just vanished. People like that come and go. People like that. You know exactly what I mean. The coldness in Clayton's voice revealed a side of him Arthur had never seen. At that moment, he realized he might have never truly known his best friend. When he returned home, he found Catherine crying in the bedroom, the baby once again rejected in its crib. But now there was something different about the child's cry. It was weaker, more desperate. "Arthur," Catherine sobbed, "I can't do it. I can't be a mother to this child. Every time I look at her, I feel like I'm lying." For the first time, Arthur understood that maybe his wife was right. Maybe they were all living a carefully constructed lie. And 2 orphan girls were the only people brave enough to expose the truth. The question that terrified him was, how many more lies were there still to uncover? The DNA test result arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after the encounter that would change everything. Arthur held the sealed envelope with trembling hands as he sat in his car, parked in front of the lab. Catherine had refused to accompany him, claiming she already knew what the result would be. When he tore open the paper and read the first lines, he felt as if the world had stopped spinning. The baby that Victoria had carried that morning in the hospital was, in fact, his biological son. The child Catherine instinctively rejected at home had no genetic link to him. But it was the second page of the report that left him completely devastated. On the lab's own initiative, due to the unusual circumstances of the case, they had also tested Victoria's paternity. The result was irrefutable. She was also his daughter. Arthur had to read it 3 times before the information fully penetrated his mind. Victoria, that 4-year-old girl living under a bridge, was his biological daughter. This meant that 5 years ago he had had a relationship with Diana and never knew the consequences. The memories started coming back like fragments of a forgotten dream. 5 years ago, he and Catherine were going through a serious marital crisis. She had discovered some compromising messages on his phone and threatened to file for divorce. For 2 weeks, they separated temporarily. It was during this period that he met Diana at a charity event his company sponsored. She was different from the women in his social circle, simple, genuine, with a smile that could light up any room. They spent a few nights together, talking about life, dreams, and hardships. Diana never showed any interest in his money. She just seemed to enjoy his company. When Catherine came back, asking for forgiveness and promising a fresh start, Arthur didn't hesitate to resume his marriage. Diana simply disappeared from his life, and he assumed she understood it had been nothing more than a moment of weakness from a married man. Now he discovered that she had carried not only a relationship, but also a child, his child, all by herself. Victoria was the fruit of those few days of genuine happiness he had experienced 5 years ago. The phone rang, interrupting his torturous thoughts. It was Dr. Robert Carter, the family lawyer. "Arthur, I need to tell you some disturbing things I've discovered about the hospital," Robert said without preamble. "I gained access to internal records through a contact in the DA's office." "What did you find?" "Beatrice isn't just the head nurse. She's a co-owner of a private clinic that facilitates illegal adoptions. The scheme works like this. They identify wealthy couples who want children and poor pregnant women. They make the swaps at the time of birth." Arthur felt nauseous. "And Diana found out? From the records I got, Diana had reported irregularities 3 months before she disappeared. She worked in the laundry and had access to information that other people didn't. Where is she now?" The silence on the other end of the line was ominous. "Arthur, Diana is hospitalized at St. Teresa's Psychiatric Hospital in Aspen. According to the records, she was admitted 3 months ago with severe amnesia caused by head trauma." Trauma? How? "Officially, a traffic accident. But the circumstances are suspicious. She was found on a deserted road with no ID and no one looking for her." Arthur hung up the phone and immediately called the shelter where the girls were temporarily staying. He needed to see them urgently. When he got there, he found Isabella teaching Victoria to write her own name, using crayons donated by volunteers. "Isabella," he said, crouching down to her level, "I need you to tell me exactly what happened the night your mother disappeared." The girl's face immediately shut down. "Why do you want to know?" "Because I found your mother. She's alive but very sick." Victoria dropped the crayon and ran to Arthur. "Mommy! Where's Mommy?" Isabella held her sister by the shoulders, her 8-year-old eyes filled with a bitter wisdom. "I saw it, Mr. Arthur. I saw everything. What did you see?" "That night, Mommy was very nervous. She had some papers hidden in the lining of the shack where we used to live. They were photos, documents, things from the hospital. She said she was going to show them to the police the next day." "What kind of photos?" "Photos of babies, of families, with names written on the back. Mommy explained it was proof that they were switching the babies." Arthur felt his blood run cold. "And then, some men came, 3 men in suits. They wanted the papers. Mommy hid us in the old closet, but we could hear everything." Isabella's voice grew quieter, as if reliving the trauma. "They said that if she didn't hand over the papers and stop reporting them, they would hurt us. Mommy screamed, said she would never let anyone touch her daughters." "What happened next?" "She managed to escape through the back window, taking the papers. The men ran after her. We stayed hidden until morning, but Mommy never came back." Victoria started to cry softly. "Did the bad men take Mommy?" Arthur hugged both girls, feeling the weight of the responsibility that was falling on his shoulders. Diana had sacrificed everything to protect her daughters and expose the truth, and he had been too blind to realize he had a responsibility in this story. "Isabella, do you still have those papers?" "Mommy hid them in a secret place before she ran, but I know where it is." That afternoon, Arthur accompanied the girls to an abandoned landfill on the outskirts of Denver, where they had temporarily lived after losing their previous shack. Isabella led them to a rusty metal structure and, with the agility of someone who knew every inch of that place, retrieved a plastic envelope hidden inside a pipe. The contents of the envelope were devastating. There were photos of dozens of babies, with notes detailing the swaps, financial records showing large payments to Beatrice and other hospital staff, and even more shockingly, documents proving the involvement of influential people in the city in the scheme. Among the names listed, Arthur recognized local politicians, well-known businessmen, and, to his complete devastation, he found records of bank transfers from a business account he knew very well, Miller and Associates. Clayton was funding the scheme. When he confronted this discovery with his suspicions about Victoria's paternity, a much more sinister story began to emerge. Clayton hadn't just used Diana and abandoned her. He was actively participating in a scheme that destroyed families. And when Diana threatened to expose everything, he arranged for her to be silenced. Arthur's phone rang. It was Catherine, and her voice was filled with panic. "Arthur, you need to come home now. Clayton is here, and he has the baby. He says he needs to talk to you urgently." "I'm on my way," Arthur said, feeling terror creep up his spine. "Don't leave him alone with him. It's too late." Catherine whispered, "He already took him." The call dropped, leaving Arthur paralyzed in the middle of the landfill with 2 orphan girls looking to him for protection, while his best friend had kidnapped the child he now knew to be his only legitimate son. The web of lies and betrayals had closed around him, and for the first time, Arthur understood he was fighting not just for the truth, but for the lives of the people he loved most. Arthur's desperate race through the streets of Denver was interrupted by a call that would change everything. It was Clayton, and his voice was unrecognizable, filled with a coldness that made Arthur's blood run cold. "Arthur, it's time we talked like men. Come to the construction office, alone. Bring the documents those brats found. Where is my son?" "Clayton, your son?" The laugh that echoed over the phone was bitter. "My dear friend, you still don't get it, do you? Come on over, and maybe I'll clear a few things up for you." Arthur left Isabella and Victoria in the car with the social worker he had called, promising to be back soon. The girls seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Isabella held his hand tightly before he left. "Mr. Arthur," she said, "remember what Mommy always said, the truth always comes out, even when they try to hide it." The Miller and Associates office was shrouded in twilight when Arthur arrived. Clayton was sitting behind the desk they had shared for 15 years, holding the baby in his lap with a tenderness that contrasted frighteningly with his icy expression. "Sit down," Clayton said, pointing to the chair in front of the desk. "It's time for you to find out who your partner really is. Where is Catherine?" "Catherine is at home, probably crying and blaming herself for another failure in her life. Poor thing, always so fragile." The way Clayton spoke about his wife made Arthur realize there were layers of cruelty in the man before him that he had never suspected. "Do you know this child, Arthur?" Clayton asked, holding up the baby. "Do you know who he really is?" "He's my son. The DNA test confirmed it." "Your son," Clayton repeated, smiling disturbingly. "Funny how life plays tricks, isn't it? Because this child is also my grandson." Arthur felt the world spin. "What are you talking about? Beatrice is my sister, Arthur, my older sister, who has always taken care of me since our parents died. When she told me about the baby swapping scheme, I thought it would be interesting to participate. After all, rich families pay very well for healthy babies." The revelation hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. You planned everything?" "Not everything. Diana's involvement was an unfortunate accident. She saw things she shouldn't have seen. I tried to convince her to keep quiet, offered her money, even a better job, but she was stubborn. So you destroyed her. I protected my interests, and yours too, by the way." Clayton stood up, still holding the baby. "Do you know the most ironic part of all this? Diana never told you about Victoria because she genuinely believed you were too good a man to be destroyed by a scandal." Arthur felt tears burning his eyes. "She protected me, and look where it got her. Her daughters living on the street, her in a mental institution with no memory. Sometimes kindness is the greatest weakness. Where are the documents about the other families involved?" Clayton laughed. "I burned them all last night. There's no evidence left. It's the word of 2 street kids against that of respectable members of society." At that moment, the office door opened silently. It was Beatrice, accompanied by 2 men Arthur recognized from Isabella's descriptions. They were the same ones who had threatened Diana. "Arthur," Beatrice said with false kindness, "you've always been an intelligent man. I'm sure you can understand that some situations require discretion. You won't be able to cover this up forever." "We don't need to cover it up forever," Clayton replied. "Just long enough to reorganize things. Beatrice has already requested a transfer to another state. I'm going to sell my share of the company and move to Chicago, and you and me. You will raise this baby as if he were Catherine's son. You will stop looking for Diana, and you will allow those 2 girls to be sent to an orphanage in another state. Everyone moves on with their lives." Arthur looked at his son in Clayton's arms and felt a fury he had never experienced. Never. "Then you forced our hand." One of the men approached, but at that moment, voices echoed from outside the building. They were the sirens of ambulances and official cars. Through the window, Arthur saw a commotion on the street. "What's happening?" Beatrice asked nervously. The answer came when Dr. Robert Carter entered the office, accompanied by two investigators from the district attorney's office. "Arthur, are you okay? Robert, how did you—" Isabella called me. "She memorized my number when you talked to me in front of them yesterday. Smart girl." Robert looked directly at Clayton. "Mr. Clayton Nascimento, you are under arrest for involvement in a baby trafficking scheme, threats, and coercion." "This is ridiculous," Beatrice protested. "You have no evidence." "Actually, we do," said one of the investigators. "Diana Santos regained her memory 3 days ago. She contacted us from Aspen and told us everything. The doctors confirmed her amnesia was caused by psychological trauma, not physical. She was pretending not to remember out of fear of you. The world seemed to stop. Diana was alive, conscious, and had found the strength to expose the truth. She also revealed where she hid a second copy of the documents," the investigator continued. "In a safe deposit box at Bank of America, in the name of Victoria Santos. Very clever." Clayton tried to run, still carrying the baby, but was immediately apprehended. As he handed the child to Arthur, he whispered, "You don't know what you've gotten yourself into. This is bigger than you think." But Arthur was no longer listening. He was holding his true son in his arms for the first time, fully aware of who he was, and felt a connection he had never experienced with the other child. 2 weeks later, Arthur was at St. Teresa's Hospital in Aspen, holding Diana's hands as she met the son she had helped save. She was thinner, with premature grey hairs, but her eyes held the same sweetness he remembered. "Thank you for taking care of our girls," she said, referring to Isabella and Victoria, who were playing in the hospital courtyard. "Our girls?" Diana smiled. "Isabella isn't my biological daughter. I found her abandoned when she was 3 and raised her as my own. But now you are her family too." The final revelation came when Diana explained that she had discovered her pregnancy with Victoria shortly after Arthur reconciled with his wife, but decided not to tell him because she didn't want to destroy a family. "I thought you would be happy with Catherine. I never imagined that he," she pointed discreetly to a picture of Clayton in the newspaper, "was capable of such evil. And now, what happens now?" Diana looked out the window, where Victoria was pushing Isabella on a makeshift swing, while the baby slept peacefully in the stroller beside them. "Now we raise our children together, like a real family." 6 months later, on Christmas Eve, Arthur watched his transformed home. Isabella and Victoria had adapted quickly to their new life, attending school and making friends. The baby, whom they decided to name Gabriel, was growing up healthy and surrounded by love. Diana had moved into a house nearby, maintaining her independence but actively participating in raising the children. Catherine had filed for divorce and moved to Phoenix, where she was starting a new life with psychological counseling. Clayton and Beatrice were convicted and serving time. The scandal rocked the city, but also brought justice to dozens of families who had been separated by the scheme. "Daddy," said Victoria, running to hug him. "Mommy Diana said we're going to put up the Christmas tree today." Arthur smiled, understanding that sometimes life needed to be completely destroyed to be rebuilt the right way. He looked at Isabella, who was helping Diana prepare dinner, and at Gabriel, who was taking his first steps in the garden. 2 brave girls had burst into his life one hospital morning, carrying not just a baby, but the truth that would change everything. And now, finally, he had a family built on a solid foundation of love, honesty, and courage. The Christmas music echoed through the house as 4 children, because Isabella and Victoria were his daughters of the heart, even without blood ties, decorated the tree under the emotional gaze of their parents. It was the family none of them had planned, but one they had all chosen to build together. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a score from 0 to 10, and thank you so much.